Denver glittered that night like it believed in redemption. The charity gala occupied the top floor of a downtown hotel. Glass walls, gold light, polished marble reflecting a version of us that didn't exist. From the outside, we were what the foundation loved to parade. A model family. Blended. Successful. Stable. The kind of story donors applaud because it reassures them that effort fixes everything. Our name was printed on a small card at the center of a $10,000 table. I had paid for that table without hesitation. Paid for the tuxedo I wore. Paid for the dress Emily floated in. Paid for the illusion. Linda adjusted my bow tie before we entered the ballroom. She smiled the way she used to when we first married. Proud, grateful, almost relieved. "You've done so much for us," she whispered. I believed her. That was my mistake. The room shimmered with conversation and clinking glasses. People shook my hand, called me generous, steady, dependable. I wore those words like medals. I had earned them. Years of overtime. Years of signing checks while pretending the numbers didn't tighten around my throat. When they introduced Emily to speak, the spotlight found her instantly. She walked to the stage with effortless confidence. She had always been good at commanding attention. I had financed her debate classes, her acting workshops, her public speaking coach. I had told myself I was investing in her future. She began beautifully. Gratitude poured from her lips like something rehearsed and perfect. The foundation, the city, her mother. Then she paused. She glanced toward our table, eyes brushing over me like I was furniture. The smile never left her face. "And of course," she said into the microphone, her tone playful, "our family wouldn't be complete without a beat, a delicate laugh. Well, actually, if he walked out of this room right now, nothing here would change." The room exploded. Laughter. Applause. Someone at another table even whistled. For a moment I thought I had misheard her. But no. I saw the way she held the mic. The way she let the line breathe. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't nervous humor. It was precise. A blade wrapped in silk. I nodded. That is what I did. I nodded. I did not flinch. I did not lower my eyes. I did not defend myself. I even allowed the faintest smile to rest on my face, as if I were in on the joke. Linda laughed. That was the part that settled something inside me. She didn't tense. She didn't look horrified. She didn't touch my arm in apology. She laughed soft, approving, and then nodded, as if Emily had delivered a clever, harmless punchline. I felt something shift. Not crack. Not shatter. Shift. Because in that instant, I understood this wasn't a teenager's improvisation. It was a truth she had grown comfortable enough to say publicly. A verdict delivered under chandeliers. I stood there beside the foundation's logo, surrounded by people who had just been told that my absence would be inconsequential. And they had agreed. They had applauded. Years flickered behind my eyes. Private school tuition, 6 figures by the time she graduated. The down payment on her first car. The medical bills Ryan had promised to handle later. The studio apartment near campus with exposed brick and soft lighting she loved posting about online. I never commented on those posts. I noticed, though, how the captions read, "Grateful for my parents," plural. Ryan. He attended 2 birthdays a year with an expensive gift and no financial responsibility. He arrived late. He left early. He carried the sacred title anyway. Dad. I carried everything else. Apparently none of it changed anything. Emily finished her speech to a standing ovation. She stepped down gracefully. Donors patted her shoulder. Compliments rained over our table. "She's brilliant," someone told me. I agreed. She was brilliant enough to reduce me to background noise in a single sentence. When she returned to the table, she kissed Linda's cheek. She thanked the foundation director. She avoided my gaze just long enough for it to be deliberate. "You were great," I told her. My voice did not shake. Linda squeezed my knee under the table. "She's just teasing," she murmured. Teasing implies affection. There was no affection in that line. There was certainty. The rest of the evening blurred into handshakes and hollow praise. I signed another pledge before we left. A generous one. People admired that. Dependable. That word followed me into the elevator. Back in the hotel suite, Linda slipped off her heels and laughed about how bold Emily had been. She said it with pride. She's always had that sharp humor, she added. Sharp, yes. When she fell asleep, I remained awake. The city lights outside the window looked indifferent. I stood there in silence, replaying the moment again and again. Not to wound myself, but to analyze it. If I walked out of the room, nothing would change. That sentence revealed more than she intended, because I realized something terrifying. I had mistaken indispensability for love. I had believed that paying the bills, solving crises, smoothing over chaos, that those things built loyalty. But infrastructure is invisible when functioning, only noticed when it fails. And in that ballroom, under public applause, I had been informed that I was nothing more than a well-maintained system. Not a father, not even a respected husband, a utility. I sat down at the small desk in the suite and opened my phone. I didn't feel rage. Rage is loud. What I felt was clarity. The wedding venue deposit, the one charged to my card for Emily's upcoming ceremony, was scheduled to auto-process in 48 hours. I stared at the payment details for a long time. Not because I hesitated, because I wanted to understand the weight of what I was about to do. Years of silent tolerance had brought us to that ballroom. Years of swallowing comparisons to Ryan. Years of hearing, "He's still her real dad, you know," delivered gently as if I needed reminding. Tonight had simply stripped the illusion bare. If I walked out, nothing would change. Very well. I would test that theory. My thumb hovered over the screen. Still calm. Still steady. No dramatic gestures. No confrontation. Just one adjustment. One removal of support. Not everything at once. Just the foundation. Methodical. Emotionless. As I tapped into the banking portal, the city lights reflected in the glass like distant witnesses. Linda slept peacefully behind me, unaware that something fundamental had already ended. I did not cause a scene. I did not shout in the ballroom. I did not defend my name under chandeliers. I simply decided that if my presence meant nothing, then my absence would finally mean something. And for the first time in years, I felt power settle into my hands. Quiet, precise, irreversible. I did not confront them in Denver. I did not mention the stage. I did not mention the applause. I waited. The flight back to Omaha was quiet. Emily scrolled through her phone, smiling at messages. No doubt congratulations about her hilarious speech. Linda leaned against the window and slept, peaceful, unburdened. I watched the clouds below us and felt something unfamiliar settle into my spine. Not anger, resolution. I understood something with a clarity that felt almost surgical. Scenes are for people who want validation. I wanted correction. When we landed and returned home, the house felt the same as always. Warm lights, framed photos, polished floors. I had refinished myself 3 summers ago. Evidence of labor everywhere. Evidence of me. Yet in Denver I had been informed that my removal would be irrelevant. I went upstairs, changed out of the tuxedo, folded it carefully, placed it back in its garment bag. I performed each movement slowly, deliberately, like a man putting away a uniform after a final shift. 3 hours after the gala, 3 hours after the applause, I turned off my phone. Not dramatically, quietly. Then I opened my laptop. The first action was almost symbolic. A single automatic payment. The deposit for Emily's wedding venue. The one she had called the perfect space. The one Linda had cried over when they toured it. It was charged to my card. Not Ryan's. Not a joint account. Mine. I stared at the scheduled transaction for a long time, remembering the day Emily hugged her mother and said, "This is where I'll start my real life." Her real life. Apparently one that functioned identically with or without me. I canceled the payment. The confirmation email arrived instantly. I didn't shut everything down at once. That would have been impulsive. Emotional. I am not impulsive. I began with the foundation. Next, I logged into the joint account, The one labeled family expenses, mortgage supplements, utilities, insurance, streaming services Emily never paid for but used constantly. I transferred the remaining balance into my personal account. Methodical, emotionless. The system sent automated alerts. Linda's phone buzzed from the nightstand downstairs. She ignored it. I continued. The house deed had always been in my name. I had added Linda years ago because it felt right. Because I believed partnership required shared ground. Belief is expensive. By morning, the paperwork to revert ownership was drafted and scheduled for notarization. I did not rush it. I did not hesitate. The business, my company, had always been registered solely under me. I had granted Linda administrative access because she liked telling friends it was our venture. I removed her permissions. 3 clicks. 16 years of illusion erased by a progress bar. I closed the joint credit line, canceled the secondary cards, changed the alarm codes, reassigned the Wi-Fi administrator password. Each action small on its own, together decisive. By the time the sun rose over Omaha, the infrastructure of our life had shifted entirely back to its original owner. Me. I brewed coffee as usual. Linda came downstairs in her robe, unaware that the ground beneath her comfort had already moved. "You're up early," she said. "I have things to handle," I replied. My tone was even. Emily texted from her apartment mid-morning. Something about finalizing florist details. A heart emoji. Casual dependence wrapped in affection. I did not respond. At 10:17 a.m., the first notification arrived in her inbox. Payment failed, venue deposit declined. I knew the timing because I had calculated it. By 10:23, Linda's phone began vibrating. She frowned at the screen. "That's strange," she murmured. "It says the payment didn't go through." I said nothing. She tried calling the venue coordinator. She paced. She assumed error. "It must be a bank glitch," she said. "Can you check?" I sipped my coffee. "No," I answered. That was the first crack. She stared at me as if she hadn't heard correctly. "What do you mean no?" "I mean no." There was no raised voice. No anger. Just refusal. The phone rang again. Emily this time. Linda answered immediately, slipping into reassurance mode. "Sweetheart, it's probably technical. We'll fix it." I watched her promise resolution for something that no longer existed. By afternoon, the contractor had confirmed the reservation would be released within 72 hours if payment wasn't secured. Panic has a particular sound. It is sharp, high-pitched, disorganized. Emily called me directly. I let it ring. She called again. Voicemail. Linda's tone shifted from confusion to accusation by evening. "You're overreacting," she said. "To what?" I asked calmly. "To whatever this is about." There it was. Not the speech. Not the humiliation. Just whatever this is. I leaned back in my chair and studied her. "In Denver," I said evenly. "Your daughter clarified my role." Linda blinked. "Oh my God. That was a joke." "Was it?" Silence. Because we both knew it wasn't. By nightfall, Emily was calling everyone. The planner. The florist. Friends. Even neighbors. Trying to locate me like I was a missing utility worker required to restore service. Ryan was contacted. Ryan was suddenly busy. Ryan could not cover the deposit. Ryan had always been busy when money was required. I remained silent. For the first time, I saw it without distortion. I was not valued as a husband. I was not valued as a stepfather. I was valued as a seamless payment system. Their apologies weren't about what was said on stage. They were about what stopped working afterward. No one regretted the laughter. They regretted the declined card. By midnight, the house felt different. Quieter. Tense. Linda sat across from me, eyes wet. "You're destroying this family," she whispered. I shook my head. "No," I said softly. "I'm testing whether it exists." She had no answer. Because if my presence truly changed nothing, then my absence should be survivable. And yet, systems were already failing. Lights still worked. Water still ran. But something more important had stopped. Automatic support. Invisible labor. Unquestioned funding. I didn't leave in anger. I didn't pack a suitcase. I simply withdrew. Financially, emotionally, structurally. And as the failed payment emails continued to arrive, I waited. Not for gratitude. Not for reconciliation. For recognition. The panic didn't explode all at once. It seeped, like water finding cracks in a foundation that had always looked solid from the street. The first 48 hours after the failed payment were denial. Linda insisted it was technical. Emily insisted it was temporary. Ryan insisted he was working on something. I insisted on nothing. I simply watched. The venue coordinator's second email arrived with formal language this time. If payment is not secured by 5 p.m. Friday, the reservation will be forfeited and offered to the next client on the waiting list. I knew the waiting list was long. Emily had bragged about it. That morning, she showed up at the house unannounced. She didn't knock the way she used to. Light, affectionate taps followed by, "Hi!" She pounded. Rapid, sharp, urgent. When I opened the door, she was pale beneath carefully applied makeup. Her voice trembled with something she wasn't accustomed to feeling. "What did you do?" Not why. What? I stepped aside to let her in. She walked into the living room as if entering hostile territory. Her eyes moved around the space. The furniture I chose, the artwork I framed, the floors I refinished. "All I need is for you to fix it," she said quickly. "Just call the bank. Tell them it's a mistake." It wasn't a mistake. Her face tightened. "So this is about Denver? You're seriously doing this because of a joke?" There it was again. Reduction. Minimization. Public verdict reframed as humor. I held her gaze. "Do you believe what you said?" Silence. Then, defensive irritation. "That's not the point." "It is exactly the point." Linda appeared behind her, already crying. She had been crying more often lately. Not from guilt. From inconvenience. "Please," Linda whispered to me. "Don't punish her over pride." Pride. An interesting word. I looked at both of them and felt something almost clinical settle into place. "This isn't punishment," I said evenly. "It's correction." Emily's voice rose. "You're ruining my wedding." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm removing my participation." The difference mattered. To me. To them, it felt identical. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and inhaled sharply. "They're canceling the florist if we don't confirm the venue," she muttered. "Systems collapse in chains. That's the nature of dependence." Ryan arrived that afternoon. Not dramatically. Not heroically. He walked in with the posture of a man already defeated by numbers he couldn't meet. He avoided my eyes at first, then forced himself to look at me. "Can we talk?" he asked. "We are talking." He cleared his throat. "Look, whatever this is, it's between you and Linda. Don't drag Emily into it." I almost smiled. For 16 years, he had not contributed meaningfully to tuition, rent, insurance, medical bills. He had floated in and out of her life like a seasonal breeze. Yet now he stood here invoking responsibility. "She was dragged into it when she declared me irrelevant," I answered. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "She didn't mean it like that." "How did she mean it?" He had no answer. Because meaning isn't defined by intent. It's defined by truth. And she had spoken hers. By evening, the house felt like a courtroom without a judge. Accusations filled the air. Linda accused me of cruelty. Emily accused me of selfishness. Ryan accused me of escalation. Not one of them accused her words. That detail stayed with me. Not one apology began with, "What we did was wrong." Every sentence began with, "You're overreacting," which told me everything. The contractor called at 4:42 p.m. on Friday. Emily answered on speaker. "I'm sorry," the woman said professionally. "Without confirmation, we have to release the date." There was a hollow silence after the call ended. The date was gone. Not because I sabotaged it. Because I stopped financing it. Emily's composure cracked then. She turned to Ryan first. Can you fix this? He looked away. I don't have that kind of liquidity right now. Liquidity. A word for men who have avoided responsibility long enough to learn financial jargon but not accountability. Her eyes moved to me. You said nothing would change if you left. I reminded her quietly. This is what nothing changing looks like. She flinched. Linda's voice broke. How can you be so cold? Cold. Another interesting word. Cold implies lack of feeling. What I felt was clarity. For years, I had been the invisible structure holding everything upright. Mortgage supplements, emergency funds, quiet transfers labeled miscellaneous. They never asked how much it cost me. They only noticed when it stopped. And now something had truly stopped working. Not the lights, not the water. Expectation. That evening, Ryan left early. He muttered something about figuring something out. He did not look confident. Emily locked herself in her old bedroom upstairs. I could hear her crying through the floorboards. Linda stood in the kitchen staring at the counters like they might provide answers. You've made your point, she said finally. No, I corrected gently. You're just starting to understand it. She looked at me as if seeing a stranger. But I hadn't changed. I had simply withdrawn the part of me they depended on while dismissing. That night I walked through the house slowly. Each room carried evidence of investment. The guest bedroom Emily redesigned with my credit card. The backyard patio I built by hand. The dining table purchased after she said the old one felt cheap. None of those things had been acknowledged publicly in Denver. Because infrastructure doesn't get applause. It gets assumed. I stopped in the living room and turned off the lights one by one. The house didn't collapse. But it felt different. Less like a stage. More like a structure reclaimed. Upstairs, I heard Linda speaking softly through Emily's door. I'll talk to him, she promised. But she had already talked to me. She had nodded in the ballroom. That nod mattered more than anything said afterward. Because betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's agreement disguised as laughter. By midnight, the panic had transformed into quiet fear. They understood now that this wasn't temporary. That I wasn't bluffing. That the automatic system they had relied on had shut down permanently. And in that stillness, I realized something unsettling. They didn't miss me. They missed access. Silence has weight. Not the peaceful kind. Not the soft, forgiving quiet of early morning. This silence pressed against the walls. It echoed in hallways. It made every footstep deliberate. The house in Omaha had always been full of movement. Linda's voice in the kitchen. Emily's music drifting from upstairs when she still lived here. The hum of a family operating on routines I funded and maintained. Now the routines were breaking. Not dramatically, systematically. The wedding date was gone. The venue had moved on without ceremony. The florist canceled. The planner stopped answering Emily's calls with the same warmth. When money hesitates, so does loyalty. Ryan called once more 2 days later. I answered this time. I can't cover it, he admitted flatly. No performance. No excuses wrapped in charm. Just limitation. I know, I said. He exhaled slowly. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. No, I replied. I'm making it visible. He didn't argue further. He couldn't. Because visibility is cruel to those who have survived on invisibility. After that call, something shifted inside the house. The anger cooled. The accusations slowed. What replaced them was fear. Not fear of me. Fear of instability. Emily came downstairs that evening with red eyes and bare feet. She didn't look defiant anymore. She looked uncertain. I didn't think you'd actually do it, she said quietly. That sentence told me everything. She hadn't believed I had limits. I listened carefully in Denver, I answered. You said my presence didn't matter. I wanted to respect that. Her jaw trembled. I was joking. Then why did everyone laugh like it was true? She had no answer. Linda stood behind her, hands clasped tightly together. She looked smaller lately, less certain. You're proving her point, Linda whispered. You're walking out. I shook my head slowly. I haven't left, I said. I'm still here. And that was the part they didn't understand. I didn't storm off. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't disappear in anger. I remained, but I stopped carrying. Mortgage payments continued because the house was mine. Utilities stayed on because I live here. Groceries appeared because I eat. What stopped were the extras, the invisible extensions, the safety nets that had allowed everyone else to float comfortably above consequence. Emily's calls became shorter, less accusatory, more careful. Linda stopped using the word overreacting. Ryan stopped calling entirely. Days passed. The house began to feel like what it actually was. A structure owned by one man. Not a backdrop. Not a stage for applause. A building held together by labor. One evening, I sat alone in the living room after Linda went to bed. The photographs on the mantel caught my eye. Birthdays, graduations, smiling faces. I stepped closer. In nearly every frame, I stood slightly to the side. Never centered. Never absent. Present but peripheral. I realized something painful in that quiet moment. They hadn't erased me. I had positioned myself there. Always accommodating. Always absorbing. Always grateful for crumbs of acknowledgement because I believed sacrifice would eventually translate into respect. It doesn't. Respect is not a delayed payment. It is immediate or it does not exist. 3 days later, the wedding officially postponed. That was the language used in Emily's social media post. No explanation. No accountability. Just a soft announcement about unexpected changes. The comments flooded in with sympathy. No one mentioned Denver. No one mentioned the stage. No one mentioned the sentence that detonated everything. Because public humiliation is easy to deliver. Private consequences are harder to narrate. Linda sat across from me at the kitchen table that night. "What happens now?" she asked. It was the first honest question she had asked since the gala. "Now?" I repeated. She nodded. I considered it carefully. "Now we live in truth," I said. Her eyes filled again. "And what is that?" "That I was never your partner," I answered quietly. "I was your support system." The words hurt her. I could see it. But pain is not the same as injustice. For 16 years I had provided financial oxygen to a family that publicly declared I was unnecessary. And when the oxygen thinned, they called it cruelty. Not clarity. Emily moved out of the house 2 weeks later. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just quietly. She packed boxes and avoided eye contact. Ryan helped her with a borrowed truck. He didn't look at me either. Before she left, she paused in the doorway. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "Neither did I. But meaning is irrelevant once truth is exposed." After the truck disappeared down the street, the house felt larger. Empty in some places, honest in others. Linda walked through rooms as if measuring loss. "You could fix this," she said softly one night. "Yes," I agreed. Could. One transfer. One apology accepted. One reversal of consequence. But then what? Another ballroom someday. Another laugh. Another nod. I looked at her across the dim light of the living room. "Would anything change?" I asked. She didn't answer, because she couldn't promise it would. And I had already lived through one public declaration of irrelevance. I would not volunteer for another. Now I sit alone in a house that no longer functions as someone else's backdrop. The systems are simplified. The expectations are clear. The silence is clean. They finally understand something. When something truly stopped working, it wasn't the payment. It was the structure. I was never the extra man in the room. I was the beam holding the ceiling in place. And when that beam steps back, the room feels different. Not collapsed, just exposed. So tell me, was I wrong to stop being the foundation for people who declared I was unnecessary?